Okay, looks like we're ready to go here. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Kohlmeyer. I'm a lecturer in the Masters of Biotech program at Northeastern, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Ted Palashis. Ted, why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your company and your background and what you do for the pharmaceutical biotech clients?
Sure. First, thank you for having me, Ian, for hosting. My motivation for doing this was a lot of what we do is educational in terms of clients, introducing clients that we have to what's involved in project management. We are Overbrook Support Services, are laboratory lifecycle support specialists. So what that means is we support laboratories for the life cycle of their operation. So that includes project management. We do asset management and also engineering for instrumentation in the laboratory. And there are basically three legs to the chair. It's a way to look at it. You've got the IP, you've got the personnel, and you have the tools of the trade, which are the instruments that produce the data that's required. We focus primarily on the instrumentation side. Our clients range from large pharmaceutical companies right down to startups. And we've been doing this for 25 years. I'm the president of the company. And we have evolved pretty much organically to really be able to address and provide solutions for laboratories that have been expanding, that are relocating, that are looking to require equipment planning and a level of expertise that they may not have internally. So that's our role in helping cure cancers and provide technology and the ability for scientists to actually focus on their science.
Okay, great. And for you personally, how did you make your way into this area of the business? What's been your personal journey?
Um, Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn now and then. I started off as an entrepreneur. In fact, I almost failed out of chemistry when I was in high school. Who would have thought that I would end up in the sciences? Uh, Really more as an entrepreneurial venture when I started the company 25 years ago. And I had worked with a gentleman that was doing fit outs for laboratories. And at the time, we got into a conversation, and I was working for a large company at the time. And we were going through a strategic planning process. And he said, geez, we could use some help as well. So I ended up working with him and thought that the model was great because there isn't a scientist out there that doesn't either need something or has something that they're willing to sell. So I started working with them and then realized that the industry had a lot of opportunity and decided to go on my own. And that was 27 years ago.
Okay, interesting. So you came at it more from an entrepreneurial perspective as opposed to a lab person that basically,
That's right.
progressed and then moved into their own business or looked at it as a
Exactly.
business opportunity. Okay, interesting.
Exactly right.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned your company provides a number of different services related to a client's lab infrastructure. I'm wondering if you could walk us through, and if we just focus more on a lab expansion or relocation project, what would be the high level steps for a project such as that?
So looking at it holistically, um, which would include both the construction side as well as specifically what we do. There are basically three steps. So the lab determines, they do an assessment um, and planning. So they assess what their current capabilities are, what they're looking in terms of a science and business plan that are integrated. Then there's a design and development stage. So finding a space to be able to accommodate those plans and those
Mhm.
aspirations. The construction of the actual space or the expansion of that space, and then post-construction. occupying that space and actually becoming operational. Specifically to what we do, usually the owner's project manager is the first step, because the owner's project manager will help in determining, where the space or how they're going to expand the facility. They'll put together the architectural engineering team, the equipment planning team. They'll help manage the actual physical build out of the space. In terms of our involvement as equipment planners and relocation managers, we try to get involved right at that earlier stage, because part of determining if the space is suitable for the expansion or the relocation, there's an element of equipment planning involved. Will the equipment fit in the space? What's the workflow going to look like? What are the limitations in terms of the mechanicals? In some cases, you're doing a conversion from an office space to a lab space. Is that space suitable for that, or is it going to cost, beyond what the budget numbers would justify? So getting involved in that stage of the planning, pretty much from the get-go, is important, and that's the role that we play. So we're consultants, but we're also instrumentation specialists, again, on that third leg of the stool. And once we become engaged, then the first very bedrock information that we put together is, if it's an existing lab, what do you have in the laboratory? What are the instruments that you have in the laboratory? Getting an understanding what the workflows are in the laboratory, what assays are you running? Because that helps us understand where the instrumentation has to be placed. And oftentimes at the initial stages, we'll be sitting down with scientists and, we really want to have the instrument placed at a specific part in the laboratory. And in earlier discussions you and I had, Ian, as a scientist, you may like it because you're overlooking you're looking out over the garden, but you're facing a window that has a temperature variation because the sun beats down on it, 4 or 5 hours a day, so it's not suitable. Or it being placed, you have a flight tube underneath an air conditioner and outflow, which would affect the operation of the instrument. So these are things that architects and engineers and even OPMs, owners, project managers, wouldn't necessarily know. It wouldn't be visceral. It wouldn't be something, their area of expertise. And the overarching, and we can talk about this later on, but the overarching sort of mindset is, any more than you would hire a doctor and expect them, if they're a GP, to do brain surgery or be a nephrologist or be a gastroenterologist or be a podiatrist, to do any of these specialty functions. It's unfair of management and a project management role to expect a project manager, certainly internally, to have all of those skill sets. It's impossible. So that's where we come in.
Okay. Yeah. And I can certainly relate. I mean, we discussed earlier about my personal experience when I worked in a lab. So for the students' benefit.
You're not an outlier at all.
Right. So I was supervisor of the microbiology lab, and the company was undertaking a new manufacturing facility. And one day I was invited to a meeting with the architect, and basically he said, "Okay, so we've got a space for your lab. Now I want you to outline what your needs are in terms of space within the context of what they had defined for the lab. You've got to place all your instrumentation, all your laminar flow hoods, and all your outlets." And for me, it was just completely overwhelming. So had we been in a situation where we had you as a company to be able to help me with this, it would have been amazing, because it was, as I mentioned, it was overwhelming. It was very complex, and I just really didn't have the experience to be able to say, this is exactly where everything needs to be. And I did it anyways, but I don't know how it actually worked out because I ended up leaving. So I can certainly understand the complexity. And this wasn't even on the chemistry side. So this was just at the microbiology side. So yeah, so clearly there's a lot of steps. And I guess this is where the project management element would come in, and for the students that are enrolled in this particular course, managing projects in biotechnology, they are reviewing and they're studying the actual discipline of project management, in order to be able to appreciate the complexity of biotechnology and pharmaceutical projects, whether it's establishing a new facility. But maybe it would be helpful for the students to be able to understand what are some of the phases and the steps that you would take. You had mentioned some of them, meeting with the engineering team, meeting with, starting off, kicking off the project, meeting with the clients and understanding what their needs are. But it may be helpful for the students to understand what phases you break down the project in order to be able to execute it properly and plan for success.
Yeah, of course. So we break it down. There are four. So what we do is a subset of the major project. So we're not necessarily involved in the construction, but we advise the contractors. We'll interface with the contractors and the architects and the engineers, and a lot with the lab team. And the lab team internally, is lab operations, it's the scientists, it is the the group leaders, so forth and so on. In terms of the equipment planning and the relocation management piece of it, project management, there are four basic phases. So one is discovery, two is the organization and the budget, because sometimes we're involved in actually fitting out the laboratory, but also what's it going to cost to do X, Y, and Z? What's it going to cost to relocate the instrumentation? How much is a mover going to cost? What's the cost of environmental health and safety? So we assist with that and give the client an understanding of what those costs are and how they interrelate with the project in general. And then there's the actual move management and relocating, occupying the space. In terms of specific tasks, just to give you an idea, and this is something that we often have these conversations. If you've never done a move, then sometimes we find, especially with internal project managers, that it's not something that's intentional, but they don't know what they don't know. And so our job is to help educate, because eventually we're going to have to manage the process. And,
Right.
and management is all about helping others get their job done, right? So, and we would need to do that so they can help us get our job done. So
Right.
the more knowledgeable and the greater understanding of, as you mentioned, the complexity of what's involved, the more appreciation there is of, what those skills are required in order to be able to actually to pull it off. So the discovery phase is the first phase. So there's an initial walkthrough. So we'll review the laboratory. And believe it or not, we've been asked to give proposals without ever being given access to the lab or understanding this is a true story. We were involved in an RFP process. It's a 360,000 square foot project, new research center that was being built. And the lab folks didn't have an understanding of how many assets they have, what type of assets they were up. It was all over the place. The project itself was a new build with multiple floors, and they just needed a ballpark number. So that's the bedrock information. What are the assets that you have in there? Because that's going to tell you what has to be moved, and consequently, what needs to be done to move it, how long it's going to take to move it, what's the phasing going to be, right? So that's the very first thing. The next step is understanding the space, both the launch and the landing space, in terms of what the landlord requirements are, what the permitting requirements are, town requirements in terms of to be able to occupy the space. I can tell you one of the big glitches in project management and project planning is if the certificate of occupancy doesn't get approved when the plan according to plan, because now you've got a cascading effect on everything else,
Right.
rescheduling vendors, the whole 9 yards, and it's time consuming and costly. Through that discovery phase, we set up what the communication lines are, who's responsible for what's the best way to communicate, what are the teams comprised of. When we do the auditing, we put together a equipment matrix, what the instrumentation is, what are the umbilicals that are required, what's the dimensional attributes, IT drops, everything that the architect is going to need to be able to start designing the space for us to put a fit plan together. What are the operational requirements of the lab? What are the assays that are being run in the lab? What are the mission critical workflows? As we may need to phase this. And I use the analogy, if it's an operating laboratory, you're changing the wheels on a car as it's moving, because the lab still has to operate. How do you do it in phases so it's not a complete disruption to the operation? What are the administrative requirements? So quality assurance, EH&S, safety, facilities, and how does that all fit into a lab relocation plan? So that's just getting an understanding in the discovery phase of how is the lab operating and what has to be considered, what are the instruments in the lab. The second stage is the organizational budget stage. So that's getting ready for the actual relocation of the laboratory. So scope of work, hierarchy of what the mission critical assets that have to be scheduled. We look at the landing site. What's the loading dock look like? Are there limitations in terms of when you can use freight elevators? And it may seem like these are, really granular, insignificant events, but I will tell you, it's like Benjamin Franklin's aphorism, for want of a nail, the battle was lost, right? So these things can cascade. So you can have all of your plan, best plans of mice and men, and you find out that you can't load or unload at specific times of day because of unions, or because you have other tenants that need access to the loading dock. So now you have 3 18-wheelers that have no place to be able to unload, or can't unload until that evening, and it can be really, really problematic. We do preliminary project phasing, so timelines and what milestones need to be determined. What are the vendors that are involved? So what do the contracts look like? Getting quotations for the services that they're going to provide. What level of compliancy is required? So if you're breaking down instruments, is it simple breakdown and reinstall? Are there any qualifications that have to be done? Is the laboratory a GLP or GXP environment? Do you have to have post-installation qualifications? Where are the contractors coming from? They have to be scheduled. You may have contractors coming from overseas or from Asia. They have to be given enough time to be able to put that in their schedule. And that's why the certificate of occupancy issue, if that gets changed, now you've got someone that's flying in from Frankfurt, Germany, that has to be delayed for 2 weeks, but they can't be there for another month and a half. So you have a major piece of equipment or a major assay that can't be run. So all of these things are done in the organizational stage, and how much is it going to cost to do that? And then there's the move planning and preparation. So what that is coordinating all of the vendors, all of the schedules, all of the subcontractors. We put together a maintenance matrix. So all of the different activities of all of the vendors and constituents are all predetermined. It's a project management plan, of which I'm sure everybody is familiar with. And right down to establishing and communicating what the pack and move guidelines are. Going into the laboratory and making sure that everything is tagged, making sure that the movers have the maps that they need, because you don't, if you've got 2,000 or 3,000 assets involved, and you've got 40 or 50 different movers, you can't have them walking around in circles where am I going to put this mass spec? And then there's the actual move, which is the final stage. And so that's managing all of the vendors, all of the different moving parts, having people at the launch as well as the landing sites, because you're managing the movers, you're managing the trucks, you're managing facilities, you're managing the staff, you're managing everyone that's involved in the actual move.
Right, right.
And that's
Okay.
hands-on during move day. The move day should be 5% of the activity that's involved.
Okay.
95 of it is in the preparation of the move,
Right,
if it's
right.
done properly.
Okay. So it is pretty complex. I mean, doing something like this requires, first of all, you've got to have strong project management skills, right? So you've
Undoubtedly.
so you employ people, and this was part of our previous discussion as well. You employ project people that are good at project management, obviously highly skilled, but have a strong technical background.
Correct.
So they have, through experience, whether it's working in engineering or facilities, have been through situations and just from their own experience have lived through things like this. So they know the questions to ask, and they're able to interface with the client to ensure that the right information is gathered and it's put into a project plan. And you had also reflected on, the owner's project manager typically doesn't have the experience to be able to do this. I mean, this is where your specialty services come into play, and you're able to bring extreme value to the customer by being able to take all this and take it away from them and execute and deliver. So from the project management standpoint, when you are looking to hire someone, are you looking to hire somebody that has specific training in project management, so they have PMP certification, or do you bring them on board based on their expertise, such as engineering, facilities management, and then basically train them in the area of project management?
So that's a great question. The way we are designed, we have our team, because we employ a team when we take on a project. And as I use that analogy, the healthcare analogy or doctor analogy,
Mm-hmm.
you can't be it's almost impossible to get somebody that has a high proficiency in engineering, a high proficiency in organizational managerial skills, a high proficiency in procurement and relationships, 20-year relationships with vendors, someone that understands the software and the IT and all of this. So what we
Mm-hmm.
do is we have a team collectively of subject matter experts
Okay,
that's overseen by a project manager.
I see. Okay.
The and there's a differentiation between an OPM, an owner's project manager, and an internal project manager.
Mm-hmm.
OPMs are, if they're good OPMs, are specifically knowledgeable, and some of them are excellent because it involves they have to have a high level of managerial skills and
Mm-hmm.
organizational skills to be able to run an entire project. So think of it, you've got a project that's lasting the course of 3 years. They've got contractors and construction and architects, engineering and town permitting, and all of these different aspects of just
Right.
building the facility. That is what an OPM is invaluable for.
Mm-hmm.
Internally in a organization, say in a pharmaceutical company or biotech or whatnot, the internal project manager is a representative of a client who is interfacing with the OPM or specialists like ourselves when it comes to equipment planning or relocation management. The skill set of the internal OPM obviously is managerial and an understanding of the complexity of what's involved,
Right.
but being the interface to all of the other constituents.
Mm-hmm.
More importantly, or as importantly, with that technical understanding and managerial skill, it's not just managing downward or vendor wise, it's managing up. Because what we find often is that, and as I mentioned earlier, um, internal OPMs are given responsibility without unfairly, because they don't have, they're not Swiss Army knives,
Right.
right? They
Yeah.
may be proficient in specific areas, in some cases of which they were hired, but then they're pushed into other areas.
Hmm.
So how do you gain that skill? In my opinion, it's certainly taking courses like the one that's being presented that you're doing to give them an
Hmm.
understanding of basically what's going on under the hood.
Hmm.
But if they can be in a position to either be involved in a project, either find a mentor, ride shotgun,
Hmm.
just to get an understanding, if nothing else, because they have to be able to manage upward, to manage expectations of upper management. What's
Right.
involved? How much time is involved? Why do you need to have 2 years ahead of time? Why do you have to hire an OPM at this stage of the game? What do we
Hmm.
need? You have to be able to explain that in a way that upper management can understand,
Right. Right.
right? And that is not easy. And I
Hmm.
find, and that's what motivates me to have these kind of discussions, is giving people the tools to be giving internal people that are project manager have been assigned to do this, giving them the tools and the understanding of being able to basically sell upward,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because they need to be able to get people behind them to understand what's involved so they can do what they need to do.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting because one of the aspects of one of the phases of project management in terms of the PMP approach is stakeholder management and stakeholder mapping. And, I shared my own personal experience with um, stakeholder management, internal stakeholder management for various projects that I've been involved with, more on the commercial side. But it's one of the areas that I think that I didn't do as well as I could have. And I think the whole understanding and the whole process of stakeholder mapping in management is so critical because there's obviously different hierarchies in the organization, people that have different needs in terms of the amount of information and the detail that they require. But it's something that can't be overlooked because even the most remote person that you think wouldn't be at all interested could all of a sudden become a major roadblock if they aren't given at least the high level, I wouldn't say respect, but at least, have some level of engagement with regards to the project and what's happening. So I can certainly relate, and I emphasize to the students that have been in my class how important it is to take the time to do proper stakeholder mapping and management, and don't let that piece fall by the wayside because it can come up and bite you at the most
That,
unexpected time.
Ian, that's critical. And this is something that I so we run into this all the time. And the first thing that we do to get an understanding, because there's the technical aspect of it, right?
Hmm.
And it's a Gantt chart, and these are all the tasks, some of
Yeah.
which I just shared with you. But having an understanding culturally of the organization, right? Who's around the table? Are they decision makers? What kind of influence do they have? What's their level of expertise? Have they done this before?
Hmm.
What's the cultural disposition of the organization itself?
Hmm.
Most people want to do a really good job. 99, I would even go as far as saying 95% of the people that are out there want to do a good job. But there are inherent limitations based on, in many cases, the organization itself. So, for example, getting approval for a specific cost or something that needs to be done within the project may
Hmm.
take weeks or months. They don't have the clout. Understanding how the nuts and bolts or how the wiring is within the organization is extremely valuable.
Right.
Again, and this comes with experience in many
Hmm.
cases. So if you've been there, and sometimes you're involved, or we've been involved in organizations where they'll have a key stakeholder, one of the constituents involved in the project, and they've
Hmm.
been there for 25 years. And so they can pick up the phone and say, Joe, I need you to make sure that we've got, facilities over there on Thursday because we got an installation for whatever it is.
Right. Right.
And it happens. You're a lower level, you know, oper project manager, and you don't have the relationships, or you don't understand culturally how the organization works,
Yeah.
it can be very, very daunting and very, very difficult and challenging to be able to get stuff done sometimes.
Yeah, interesting. So having that understanding of who the stakeholders are, what their experience is, their background, and how they may be able to be used and be useful in a project if you hit a roadblock, or if you have the other thing that we discussed is that inevitably there's going to be some hiccups, and sometimes there's going to have to be trade-off decisions made, particularly if you're manufacturing, or you're designing a new facility where there may be things that occur as a result of, utilities or whatever, and you may not be able to deliver the project on time. So you have to be able to know who the right people are that you have to speak with to be able to let them know, perhaps we're not going to be able to have the facility ready at this particular time, or we can make these concessions, but it's going to result in perhaps some deviation from what the expectations are. So this all goes into having a proper stakeholder management plan, and also identifying who these people are if you're in a situation where you don't have 25 years experience in the organization.
It's really challenging. And that's for us as specialists. I mean, it's obviously helpful if we're brought in by an architect who needs an equipment planner and already has an existing relationship.
Hmm.
Or it may be, in some cases, we have already worked with a company that's expanded, and now the project manager or the operations people or the head scientist is now in a new facility, and they're involved in this, and they bring us along. So there's already a level of credibility. In the case of somebody internally that we're not familiar with, and if they don't have that 25 years, pick a number, 15 years experience,
Yeah.
then our job is to help educate, but give them the tools so they can be successful, not only in interfacing with us, but interfacing within the organization,
Mm.
because they need to be able to get stuff done,
Right.
right, in their role as project managers.
Hmm.
And I sort of just the way to look at it, or the way I describe it sometimes, is you're given a baton and an orchestra, and you're required now to perform a symphony.
Mm.
You don't have to know how to play a clarinet and a tuba and a bassoon, you don't need to know how to play all of the instruments, but you have to know how to read music.
Hmm.
And you have to be able to have the ability to be able to get a project or a symphony played. And your audience is upper management. Your audience is the customers in which you serve. So having an
Mm.
understanding, you got to learn how to read music first. And that's probably the most fundamental, to use the
Yeah.
analogy. And
Yeah.
that's the nuts and bolts. And that's why I say, if you can get involved in a project from the outset, be lucky enough to find a mentor, um, then you have that opportunity to be able to learn how to read music.
Right. Right. So I had a question for you, and I think this kind of leads into it, and you've alluded to it, is that what are there any tools or any mindsets or practices you think for somebody that's aspiring to become a project manager um, should adopt that would make them more effective? And I guess what I'm hearing from you is it's really being open-minded, and also I think you have to be I mean, the learning, one of the other things that I've emphasized to students is that when you leave and you graduate with your master's in biotech, the learning doesn't stop. It's continual, and especially in the biotech and pharma industry. I think any industry, but in an intensely technical and knowledge-based industry such as biotech and pharma, unless you're continually learning and improving, you'll fall behind and you won't become a valuable asset to an organization. So Just listening to you, it sounds like you're able to help these internal project managers or the OPMs become more effective at their job based on your experience, having gone through these types of very, very detailed moves. But for somebody that's starting off and thinking about project management, are there any things that you would recommend other than, finding a mentor, which
Yep.
I completely agree with. And, again, it's something that I've emphasized. You've got to try and find somebody to help you navigate, whether it's trying to get at that first interview. But is there anything else that you would recommend or think of that would help students?
So mindset, I think, you mentioned mindset is really important. And if 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 you can go into whatever it is, be it a project or you're applying for a position, or if you can incorporate both, not just the science, but also, as importantly, the business side of it as well. So what do I mean
Hmm.
by that? Understanding that they're both intertwined. The science, unless it's completely a nonprofit, if the science can't be justified economically, it's just not going to happen.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
understanding the science, that science and both the science and the business plan,
Hmm.
I think, is essential. So how do you get that knowledge? Understanding, learning about, if you're going on a job interview, find out, get a little bit of background and understanding of if it's a public company, how's the stock doing?
Right.
What drugs do they manufacture, or what research are they doing? Why are
Hmm.
they doing it? What's the and actually spending the time and do a little bit of research to get an understanding of what's driving the business, what businesses or what goals are driving the business goals of the company, as well as the science.
Hmm.
So that starts that, at least mindset wise, of an understanding of why does that company exist, and what are they trying to do? Are they trying to cure
Hmm.
cancer? Are they coming up with novel RNA approaches? Whatever it is.
Hmm.
In terms of tools, there aren't a lot of them, but I always suggest looking for white papers, because white papers usually are drilled down, whether it's
Hmm.
for project management, if it's for um, relocation project manager, if it's equipment planning, at least in our part of the business. That sort of gives you a bird's